Hello, everybody. We're going to give it a few minutes to let people sign in. Hi, everybody. We're just giving everybody a couple minutes to sign on here, and then we'll get started. Hi, everybody again that just joined. We're giving it probably about another minute for people to sign in, and then we'll get started. Okay, while we're waiting for people to sign in, I'll kick off. I'm Judy Miller. I'm a managing director here at ERMProtect. Welcome to today's webinar. We appreciate you attending. The webinar is Best Practices for Implementing AI for Organizations. Again, while everybody's signing on, let me just thank a couple of our sponsors. First sponsor is ERMProtect Cybersecurity Solutions. This is a full-service cybersecurity company founded by Silka Gonzalez 27 years ago. We're here in the Gables, and here on the slide you can see some of the services that we offer. Next slide. I want to thank ISACA South Florida as our co-sponsor, and in particular, Jay Anson. Jay is the programming director of ISACA. He's been a wonderful partner and really helped us promote this educational opportunity. ISACA, if you're not familiar with it, is a professional organization devoted to helping its members elevate their skills in information security, privacy, risk, and we put their QR code up in here. If you scan that, it will lead you to a site where you can sign up as a member. We're one of their sponsors, and they put on great events. Couple logistics. We're going to send out a recording of the webinar after the session, so don't stress if you miss a slide or a QR code. We'll be sending that out this afternoon if you're registered. And we want to encourage everyone to, if you have questions, send them on in. I'll be monitoring those. We left time at the end to get those answered. So let me next introduce our speaker. Is Collin Connors. Collin has been with us about 6 years. He leads our AI consulting practice. He's been a senior cybersecurity consultant here for 6 years. He has a PhD in computer science from the University of Miami. He has developed AI models for us that detect phishing attacks, crypto scams, and malware. He's published several papers at academic conferences on using AI to detect cybercrime, and we feel very fortunate to have him here with the company. With that, Collin, take it away.
Thank you so much, Judy. So before we get into the presentation, I want to give you guys an idea of the key takeaways I want you to walk away with. First, we're going to look at why we would want to implement AI within our organization. From there, we want to understand what the risk AI poses to our organizations. We want to discuss how can we create an AI strategy so that we're protecting ourselves and our organization. And we want to understand how we can govern AI within the organization. Finally, we're going to look at some best practices for managing AI risk, and we're going to look at some of the regulations that affect the use of AI within our environments. So I want to begin by asking the question, what is AI? At a high level, AI is simply a machine replicating a human behavior. So think about your Roomba that vacuums around your floor. There's an AI for you. Now within AI, there's a subset called machine learning, where we take data to try to replicate that human behavior. An important thing to remember is these are just math. It's not magic. It's just simple math being used to replicate behavior. Within machine learning is a subset called deep learning, which uses a fancy term, a neural network, to help replicate behavior. And within deep learning, we have our generative AI. This is probably the type of AI you're most familiar with. This is the AI that generates things such as text, images, videos, voice. And within generative AI, the AIs you're almost all familiar with are the large language models. These are your ChatGPTs of the world, your Microsoft Copilots, your Google Geminis. So why would we want to use AI? In a recent study by the Harvard Business School, 79% of corporate strategists considered AI and analytics critical to their organization's success. So some of the benefits we receive from AI are increased productivity gains, giving good employees tools to make them succeed. We also get deeper data analytics. Organizations are able to more comprehensively understand the data that they're receiving and act upon that data. We can also understand the automation of manual tasks, which allows us to take tasks that were time-consuming and error-prone and automate them to make them quicker and reduce the error rate. In fact, 73% of US companies have already adopted AI in some form. They're using it in departments like marketing and sales to create copy, to create images, to create campaigns. They're using it in their IT infrastructure to better understand threats against them. They're also using it as part of their help desk to help support their IT employees. They're using it for software engineering. So they're using AI to help them write code or to do quality assurance on that code. And they're using it in HR so that they can understand and better communicate with their employees and work on things related to HR utilizing this deep data. So when we talk about implementing AI, we need to talk about the entire ecosystem where the AI lives. So at the base is the model layer. This is the actual model that is being trained and deployed within the system. So for example, if you're familiar with Microsoft's Copilot, it uses GPT-5 as its underlying model. Or maybe Google, they use Gemini 2.5 as their underlying model. Now, maybe you've gone and you've created your own custom model that does something like classification, and you've built your own model layer out. On top of the model layer is the implementation layer. This is used where the code, the API, and any of the business logic is implemented within that AI. So again, for example, Microsoft Copilot utilizes the Microsoft Graph API. ChatGPT utilizes OpenAI's API. And if you wrote your own custom model, you probably have your own custom Python code that lets you interact and implement that model. On top of the implementation layer is the systems layer. This is the infrastructure required to host that model. So again, OpenAI runs within the OpenAI Secure Cloud. Microsoft Copilot runs in the Azure cloud environment. If you built your own model, you're probably hosting it on some local server with some local networking equipment, firewalls, switches. All of that is part of your systems layer. Then finally is the layer we're probably all most familiar with, the runtime layer. This is the environment where the user gets to interact with the model. So like ChatGPT's website is the runtime layer for ChatGPT. When we open up Microsoft Word and we have that little Copilot plugin, that's one of the runtime layers for Copilot. If we've built our own custom model, we probably have our own custom runtime layer that allows our users to interact with our model. Now that we understand the parts of the model, we need to understand how do we protect this. The first thing we need to do is create our AI strategy. In fact, 60% of leaders say their company lacks a concrete AI vision or plan. Your AI strategy is what aligns our technology with our business goals. It's going to ensure that all of our investments in AI are delivering measurable outcomes. And without an AI strategy, we have the risk of our AI adoption fragmenting and leading to wasted resources and potentially leading to compliance issues. So how do we actually build our AI strategy? The first thing we need to know is our AI goal. Before we can begin our journey, we need to define where we are going. So as an organization, when we're trying to come up with our AI goal, we need to consider things like, why are we even using AI in our organization? What do we expect the outcome of our AI implementation to be? For example, our goal could be something like, utilizing AI, we will increase profit. Or maybe utilizing AI, we will increase customer satisfaction scores. We need to know where we are going to go before we set out on our journey. Once we know what general direction we're headed, we need to establish our AI team. Now, it's important that our AI team is a cross-functional team so that we can get diverse insight into our AI strategy. So some things to consider as we're building our AI team: who within our organization are our AI supporters? Who wants to see AI succeed? We want to consider what teams are we trying to transform with AI? Who's going to be affected by the use of AI? Which of our end users are going to be using the AI in their daily task? So when we're developing our AI team, we want to consider not just taking our traditional IT team, but going across our organization. So you might want to take your IT team, your security team, your compliance team. If you're using AI in sales and marketing, you want to definitely grab your sales and marketing team. If you have employees who are going to be using AI, you want to grab your operations team. And make sure you're not just grabbing senior executives. You want to grab all different levels so that you can get a diverse input into your AI team. You want to grab your audit team, your legal team, to make sure that you're in compliance as you roll out AI. After you've established your base AI team, you need to make sure that we're actively engaging senior leadership in our AI strategy. Management's active participation is critical to the success of AI. We want to consider how senior leadership is going to be engaged in our AI implementation actively, and what role will there be for senior leadership to play during our AI implementation. For example, if we're trying to brainstorm some ideas for how senior leadership will be engaged, we might decide that we're going to brief our board of directors quarterly on all of our AI initiatives and ensure that we're inviting all senior leadership to participate actively in our AI pilot programs. Once you have your AI team established and senior leadership buy-in, it's time to create your AI strategy. So it's important to remember that AI is a transformative technology. So just like in the early days of the internet transformed how we conducted business as an organization. We want to do the same here for AI. We want to understand, how can AI transform our organizations? Yeah, there'll be some easy wins we can pick up along the way where we can use AI to enhance what we're already doing. But we want to make sure that we're considering AI as a transformative solution. We want to think of creative solutions that we have not considered yet, where we can utilize AI to reach our goals. So for example, if I'm developing a change statement, I might have a dramatic one like, through the use of AI, we will completely reshape how we're acquiring customers and delivering our product. Once we have our AI change statement, the next thing we need to do is develop our AI roadmap. Now, there's the old joke of, how do you eat an elephant? And the answer is one bite at a time. We want to use that same strategy here when we're developing our AI roadmap. It can be overwhelming to try to take on all of the innovative AI projects that we want at once. So we want to start by trying to create a list of prioritized AI projects so that we can get moving and get momentum behind our AI rollout. First, we want to consider, what are the easy wins? What are the things that we can do quickly and easily so that the organization can start seeing value from AI? From there, we want to think about all of the different departments and processes that we have within our organization. For example, if I'm a bank, I'm going to have lots of different processes like wire transfer, fraud, operations, that all could utilize AI within their processes. We want to take that list and prioritize what we can get done so that we have a clearly defined roadmap that we can follow. For example, if I'm coming up with an AI strategy, one of the easiest things I could utilize is having all of my employees use a large language model like ChatGPT, Copilot, or Gemini to increase their general efficiencies. So that might be step one. Step two might be a more transformative process, right? If I'm a bank, maybe my next step is, I want to start utilizing AI in my risk management. I want to start using AI as part of my BSA. Once we have our roadmap defined, the next thing is we need to create well-defined KPIs so that we can track our progress and ensure we're making progress towards our goal. We want to consider how we can measure the effectiveness of our AI strategy, and we want to make sure that our measurements are fairly evaluating our implementation against our goal. So again, if our goal is to have users utilizing a large language model to increase general efficiencies, some of our KPIs around that might be having 90% of our users utilizing LLMs daily. And maybe we want to reach a user feedback score of 8.5 out of 10. It's important that we're listening to our users who are actually using the model so that we understand the roadblocks and frustrations they have with the models so that we can work to improve and get better efficiencies. Now that we have an AI strategy, it's important to know where things can go wrong. So I've grabbed a couple select headlines of AI risk in the news. So these all came from the last year of some prominent headlines where AI made the news. Here's one where a prankster tricked General Motors chatbot into agreeing to sell him a very expensive car for just $1. So the prankster hopped on GM's website and noticed they had a chatbot, and as he was chatting to the bot, the user quickly realized this was just ChatGPT in the background. So the user started messing with it, trying to see what he could get the chatbot to do. Eventually, the user convinced the chatbot to agree to sell him a car for $1. Now, thankfully, when the user went into the Chevy dealership and tried to get his $1 car, the dealership told him that deals made by their AI bot are invalid, and they did not sell him the car for $1. However, an airline in Canada was not so lucky. They were held liable for their chatbot giving their passenger bad advice. So in this case, Air Canada had a chatbot on their website, and the user asked the chatbot what the bereavement policy was. If they had a death in the family, could they cancel their flight and get a refund? The chatbot said, yes, it's our policy to give a refund if you have a death in the family. So the user said, great, canceled his flight, and went on with his day. Now later, the user comes back to the human customer service asking for his refund that the chatbot said he would get. The human said, oh, the chatbot was wrong. It made that up. That's actually not our policy. We don't have a bereavement policy. So this user took Air Canada to court, and the Canadian courts agreed with the user and said that Air Canada had to refund the user because their chatbot said that that was their policy. Another example, a user was using Google Gemini to write some code, and Gemini accidentally wrote code that deleted all of the user's files. Another example of some AI risk, a professor flunked all of his students after ChatGPT falsely claimed it wrote their papers. So this professor had an end of term paper and his students submitted their papers. The professor was suspicious. He thought the students had done pretty well on the paper. So he started uploading them to ChatGPT and he asked ChatGPT, was AI used to write this paper? And for all of the papers he uploaded, ChatGPT said, yes, AI was used to write this paper. It turned out, though, the students were able to prove they had not used AI to write their paper, and ChatGPT just made that up. Another one, a lawyer in a case submitted a brief to the court with several legal citations, which is common for lawyers, right? The judge takes the brief, gives it to the other side, and the other side starts reading through it, and they find one of the citations that they weren't familiar with. So the other side does some research, and they cannot find this citation. They look for it, and eventually they go back to the court and they say, we can't find this citation. We don't know if it's real. We don't know if it exists. And it turns out the original lawyer had used ChatGPT to write that legal brief, and ChatGPT just made up a plausible sounding citation that didn't really exist, and the lawyer submitted it in court. So there's lots of different types of risks that AI exposes our organization to. For example, one type of risk that we see a lot is data loss. So we could leak sensitive information to a third party, for example, the model provider or any other third party who's using AI. And this can be done either intentionally or accidentally. This data could be things like sensitive internal data, such as your intellectual property, sensitive internal source code, things of that nature. Or it could be customer data, such as customers' dates of birth, customers' addresses, or even employee data if we're collecting and using AI to process data on our employees. Another risk we face is known as a hallucination. This is when the large language model makes something up. So it's important to remember these large language models are not all-knowing machines. They will often misstate information and provide misinformation with confidence, as we saw in some of our previous examples. Now, along with AI risk, we risk reputational damage. As we saw, it's not hard to make a headline when your AI goes wrong. So having a mistake in our AI could very easily lead to some negative headlines. And lastly, if we're going to implement AI within our environment, just like if we were to implement any other technology, we're increasing our attack surface. We're giving malicious actors a new thing that they can try to exploit and attack to cause harm to our organizations. Now, when we talk about AI governance, I like to break it down into 4 different categories. The first category I like to call the head in the sand method. So this is when organizations take no official position on AI's use. Employees aren't told if they can use it or if they can't use it. There's no AI tools provided to employees. There's just no guidance at all, no policies, no procedures. Now, naturally, this head in the sand AI governance method is not the best. You're going to lead to employees using AI with no control. You have no insight into what your employees are doing with it. It can be very dangerous. Another AI governance strategy I see taken is the bring your own AI strategy. So this is where the organization tells employees, yeah, you can use AI, but we're not going to provide you with any tools. We might even tell you what you're allowed to use AI for. You can use it for this and this. You can't use it for this and that. But it's up to you to find AI tools and use them yourself. Now, this strategy, again, is pretty dangerous. We have no insight into how our employees are utilizing AI. They can be doing whatever they want with those tools. Now, a third strategy I see a lot of organizations employ is the no AI strategy. So their policy is employees are not allowed to use AI for any purpose. Now, this is a reasonable strategy to take. If we evaluated the risk of AI and we've decided that AI is too risky for our environment, it's plausible that we might have a blanket ban on AI. However, if we do have a blanket ban on AI, we want to make sure that there's technical controls in place to actually restrict the access to AI tools. We don't want our employees going behind our backs to use AI. We want to make sure that we put controls in place to prevent that. We also want to make sure that our third-party vendors are being reviewed and ensure that they're also in compliance with our policy. If we have a policy that no employees can use AI, that should extend equally to our third-party providers, and they should not be using AI. Finally, the best AI governance strategy is to have a formalized AI governance program. This is where we tell employees that they are allowed to utilize AI, and we give them clear direction on how they're allowed to utilize it. We also give employees access to approved AI tools that are managed and we have insight into through our organization. Lastly, as part of this formalized AI governance program, we want to ensure that there's technical controls in place to enforce compliance with all of our AI policies. So to build our AI governance, our formalized AI governance program, we need to begin by creating our acceptable use policy. This is the policy that defines how employees can adopt and utilize AI within the organization. This policy clearly defines approved and unapproved AI tools and tasks. When we're developing our AI acceptable use policy, the first thing we need to consider is what is acceptable. We might want to consider what models are we going to approve. So to give you an example, here at ERMProtect, we debated what models we were going to improve. And we rolled out 2 different pilot programs for 2 different AI models. We rolled out pilot programs for Microsoft Copilot and for Google Gemini. We had some of our users utilize Copilot and some of our users utilize Gemini, and we collected feedback on how they were using it. From there, we decided that only one of them was going to be our approved model. So we approved one of those models, and we gave training to all of our employees on how they can use that one approved model. And we actually blocked all of the other models, so employees can only access the approved model on our network. Likewise, we want to consider what functions employees are allowed to use AI for. For example, if I'm in sales and marketing, can I use AI to generate images? Can I use AI to generate sales and marketing copy? If I'm a programmer, can I use AI to write code? Can I use AI to review code? If I am in a bank, can I use AI to process customer transaction or customer data? It's important that we understand and communicate which functions employees are allowed to utilize AI for. Likewise, we want to discuss what's required for the ethical use of AI. So you might have noticed on my very first slide, I have a disclaimer stating that I used AI to help me generate some of these slides and some of the images on these slides. At ERMProtect, our ethical disclosure requires that anytime we utilize AI, we disclose that. It's important that we understand what the ethical use of AI looks like within our organization, and we communicate that to all of our employees. On the flip side, it's equally important to define what is unacceptable. We need to make sure that there's a clear red line that employees cannot cross. So for example, we want to consider what functions AI is not allowed to be used in. So again, to give some examples from ERMProtect's AI rollout, we do not allow employees to utilize AI as a note taker in digital meetings. So for example, you might have heard of tools like Otter AI or Microsoft Copilot for Teams. Our employees aren't allowed to use that because we interact with clients talking about cybersecurity, sometimes talking about sensitive data, and we don't know what somebody might say on one of those calls. So because of that, as a blanket rule, employees can't use AI there so that we know that no sensitive data is going to be leaked to any AI tool. On the same note, we want to make sure we understand what data employees cannot provide to AI models. For example, if I'm a bank, am I allowed to provide customers' date of birth, customers' social security numbers to AI models? Am I allowed to provide transaction information? Maybe I've masked customer information and it's general transaction information. It's very important that we define this clearly and communicate that with our employees so that they understand what they can and, very importantly, what they cannot do when utilizing AI. Now, along with creating a new AI acceptable use policy, we want to make sure that we're updating our existing policies to take AI into account. So for example, we probably have an existing data classification policy. We want to ensure that we're updating this data data classification policy to align with our AI acceptable use policy. If I classify data, for example, as public, sensitive, confidential, I need to make sure it's clearly defined which of those data types can be provided to what AI models and under what functions that data can be used. We also want to make sure we're defining AI outputs. Am I treating the output of AI as public information? Maybe I'm treating the output of AI as sensitive information. Maybe it depends on the function. If I'm using AI in sales and marketing, maybe it's okay to treat the output as public. But if I'm using AI to generate code, maybe I want to treat that output as sensitive. It's important that this is clearly defined in our data classification policy. Likewise, we want to make sure we're updating our vendor management policy. We want to make sure that since we've gone through all of this hard work of creating an AI management program, that our vendors are following along in that program. We want to understand how are our vendors utilizing AI and what types of data from our organization are our vendors using AI for. Lastly, we want to make sure we're updating things like our incident response plan. Whenever we add a new technology, it increases our attack surface and provides another place where we might have a cyber incident. And how we respond to an AI incident is going to be slightly different than how we respond to a general cyber incident. So we want to make sure our incident response plan includes how we're going to prepare, detect, respond, and recover from any type of AI incident. Likewise, we want to make sure that we don't just have things written on paper. We want to have strict technical controls enforced within our environments. So for example, we want to block unapproved AI tools. So like I said before, at ERMProtect, we only have one approved AI model. All the other models are blocked. So using firewall rules, using DNS filtering, using application blacklist, you want to prevent users from accessing these unapproved tools. If your blanket policy is to not allow AI within your organization, you certainly want to make sure that these controls are in place so that no user can use AI within your networks. Likewise, we want to prevent users from accidentally uploading confidential data. We want to make sure that we're applying our existing data loss prevention rules to all of our AI chat interfaces. So for example, if you're utilizing Microsoft Copilot, within Microsoft Purview, you can apply your data loss prevention rules that you're using for your email already and apply that to your AI chat interface. Likewise, if we're developing our own models, we probably want to put a layer on top of our model to prevent confidential data from being leaked to the model. So we can utilize lots of different tools, such as AI-based data loss prevention, that can sit on top of our custom models and check if any users are providing sensitive information to the model. Lastly, we want to make sure that we're enforcing strict data segmentation. We want to enforce role-based access control so that users can only access data that they should have access to. For example, if I upload some data into my enterprise LLM as a user, my coworkers should not have access to my documents. We want to ensure that whatever AI we're using is split. Likewise, we want any custom models that we build to enforce data segmentation. We want to ensure that our custom models are running in an isolated sandbox environment. On top of that, we want to make sure that we're training our users. We can go through all of the hard work of creating policies and procedures, creating technical controls to enforce those. But if our users aren't informed, we are still exposed to risk. Oftentimes, the weakest link is the human. Part of our AI training, we need to demystify AI. We want to make sure users understand AI is not magic. It's simply math. The more users understand what AI is doing under the hood, the more effectively they're going to be able to utilize AI and get return on investment, as well as avoid common AI mistakes and risk. Similarly, we want to educate our users on the risk of AI. They need to understand how AI poses risk to the organization so that the users can act as a human firewall to prevent those risks. We want to inform users what our AI policies are so that they understand what they can and what they cannot do with AI, and always ensure that the users are in compliance with the organization's guidelines. Lastly, as part of our AI training, we want to ensure that users understand how to effectively use AI. It's a shame if we spend all of this time, resources, and money to create AI models and give them to our users, but none of our users actually use it. Just like any new technology, there's going to be a learning curve. So it's important that we're teaching AI use to our users so we can get return on investment on that. Now, what are some of the best practices that we can do to mitigate AI risk within our environment? Now, remember, AI is not just the model. It's the entire AI stack, from the runtime layer, the system layer, the implementation layer, all the way to the model layer. For that whole AI stack, we want to be applying our traditional cybersecurity measures. We want to be doing our traditional comprehensive cybersecurity audits so that we understand what controls are in place for each of those layers. If we've built a model and it's communicating over a network, we want to make sure we're doing network pen testing to ensure that the model is secure there. If we have a model and it's part of a larger application, we want to make sure that we're doing application pen testing to make sure that there's no weaknesses in the application that could be exposed. We want to be doing our regular secure code reviews to understand how our models work and ensure that we're using coding best practices. If I've put a model onto a server or into any cloud environment, I want to make sure that I'm doing a configuration review of that environment to ensure that the environment where the model lives is actually secure. We want to do our traditional cybersecurity risk assessments that we would do for our entire environment and ensure that AI is incorporated into our traditional risk assessments. And we want to make sure we're doing our regular security hygiene tasks like patching, backing up, checking logs that we would normally do for any other IT asset with our AI models. Now, outside of the traditional cybersecurity measures that we would take, there are some AI-specific things we want to worry about. For example, if we're utilizing an LLM in our environment, we want to make sure that we're undergoing an AI pen test. This pen test is specific to testing the model to see if there are any vulnerabilities that could be exploited by somebody who has access to that model. For example, we want to test for common vulnerabilities like prompt injection or jailbreaks to see if users could cause harm utilizing that model. We want to validate the data loss prevention. If we have data loss prevention policies and controls, we want to test those data loss prevention controls to ensure that sensitive information can't be uploaded to the model and the model won't give back sensitive information. Similarly, we want to test for sensitive information leakage. In fact, at ERMProtect, we've done a couple different AI pen tests for our clients. And in one of these pen tests, we simply asked the AI model, we said, give me all of the documents you have access to that contain passwords. And the model thought for a minute, and it gave back a list of documents that it had access to. We opened up one of those documents, and sure enough, it was a document that had a list of usernames and passwords for lots of different accounts used by that organization. Again, we want to make sure we're validating our AI unacceptable use policies. So if I say you can't use AI to write malicious code, as part of the AI pen test, we want to validate that the AI won't allow users to write malicious code, that the controls we have put in place are actually enforced. Along with the AI pen test, you're going to want to conduct an AI risk assessment. Currently, the most popular AI risk assessment framework is the NIST AI Risk Management Framework. The NIST framework breaks AI management into 4 categories. First is the govern category, where we can worry about our policies, our procedures, our AI inventory, and ensuring that our third parties are part of this. Next, it's the map function, which establishes the context of all of the AI systems. So this is where we take our AI inventory and we map common threats against that. From there, we want to measure the risk posed to our organization through those threats. So this is employing different tools, techniques, and methodologies so that we can analyze and assess the risk posed to our organization through our AI. Finally, we want to make sure that we have controls in place to manage that risk and reduce our residual risk. We want to ensure there's controls in place so that we can reduce and accept any risk that we find through our AI risk assessment. Now, it's important to remember, just like any other risk assessment, it's the same process. We're simply identifying our assets, identifying our threats, measuring our risk, implementing controls, and measuring our residual risk. So just because it has a fancy name with AI doesn't mean it's anything different than what we do traditionally. The only real difference is the scope. Lastly, we want to make sure that we are auditing our third-party vendors. We want to make sure that we're updating all of our vendor onboarding questionnaires so that as we take on new vendors, we understand how those vendors are utilizing AI. We want to review our existing third parties to understand how are they using AI and what are they doing to our data. We want to review our contracts with our third parties to ensure that they're compliant with our AI policies. And lastly, we want to require our vendors to disclose any use of AI so that we, as an organization, can understand the risk that might be posed if our vendors are utilizing AI. The final thing I want to talk about today is the AI regulatory environment. So at the federal level, we've had a lot of activity recently. In fact, starting back in January, the current administration issued an executive order titled Removing Barriers to American AI Innovation. So this executive order repealed the previous administration's AI executive order. So during the previous administration, there was 8 pillars that were considered. So the previous AI considered cybersecurity, responsible innovation, supporting workers, advancing equity and civil rights, protecting consumers, protecting privacy, the use of AI by the federal government, and promoting American AI. And in January, the current administration revoked that executive order and directed all of their agencies to review their current AI policies and gave all agencies 180 days to create a new AI action plan. So it has been 180 days since the initial executive order, and the agencies have gotten back to the executive branch, and they've created America's AI Action Plan. So currently there was only 3 pillars. The first pillar being accelerating AI innovation. And a highlight of this pillar is removing any red tape and regulations as it relates to AI. There's also building American AI infrastructure, which highlights bolstering critical infrastructure, cybersecurity as it relates to AI. And we also want to lead in international AI diplomacy and security. And from that final pillar, we got a new executive order promoting the export of American AI technology stack, where the administration is pushing hard for American AI hardware and software to be exported to our allies and partners. Lastly, the final executive order as it relates to AI is the Preventing Woke AI in Federal Government. So while the federal government says that they want to limit regulation on AI in the private sector, the government is putting restrictions on third-party model providers who want to do business with the federal government. Now, for most of us, that doesn't affect us. However, for the ChatGPTs, the OpenAIs, the Microsoft, the Googles of the world, who are building these fundamental models and seeking federal contracts, there are some additional restrictions on their models. Now, outside of the federal government, all 50 states have introduced some form of AI legislation within the last year, with 38 of the states passing AI legislation already. In particular, I want to point out that Florida has passed the Florida Digital Bill of Rights, which provides consumers the right to opt out of any form of solely automated processing performed on personal data. Now, on the other side of the world, over in Europe, they have passed the EU AI Act, which imposes some restrictions on the use of AI for organizations either based in the EU or who use AI systems to generate outputs that are used in the EU. Now, again, the EU AI Act focuses mainly on critical, sensitive AI systems. So these, again, are your ChatGPTs of the world, your Microsoft Copilots. So as long as you're not those large model providers, this act doesn't have much relevance to us. Now, lastly, I want to talk about our standard regulatory compliance. So in the previous administration, there was a joint statement by the FTC, the CFPB, the DOJ, and the EEOC, which explicitly stated that there is no AI exemption to the laws on the book. Now, recently, the FTC has been directed to lean on the side of AI innovation when conducting their audits. However, it's still important to note that just because they're leaning on the side of AI innovation does not mean that there's an AI exemption to the laws on the books. So for example, if we're a healthcare organization and we're processing HIPAA data, that AI that's used to process that data still needs to be compliant with HIPAA. The same applies if we're a city or a local government and we're processing criminal justice information. It still needs to comply with CJIS. Or if we're a bank or other financial institution, we're processing credit card data. If we're using AI to do risk assessments or fraud analysis of credit cards, we need to make sure that AI tool complies with PCI DSS. All of our standard compliance applies. So I've listed a couple here. There's many more alphabet soups to throw on there. For each of your organizations, whichever compliance or regulatory agency oversees your organization, you want to make sure that you're still in compliant. Just because you're using AI doesn't mean that the regulators won't come after you. You can't tell your regulator, oh, AI processes this. That AI still needs to be compliant. So I want to thank you guys all for coming and listening to my presentation here. I just want to let you know that ERMProtect is doing a lot in the field of managing an AI risk. Here are just some of the things that we're doing to help our clients already. So I'm going to hand the presentation back to Judy, who will facilitate some questions and answer session here.
Great presentation, Colin. You covered a lot of ground and we did get some questions. So I'll throw a few at you while we have some time left. You mentioned that you were able to find a vulnerability in one of your clients' AI systems. I think you said that you were able to harvest some passwords. How did you remediate that? And is there something the client could have done to prevent that attack?
Yeah, that's a great question. So in that specific case, we were conducting a large language model pen test. So the client gave us access to their model that they were using, and they wanted to see what we could do. So in that case, we had asked it to give us a list of documents with passwords, and it found them. Now on the client's end, what had gone wrong was because they were using an enterprise large language model, the model had access to everything that was stored in their cloud storage account. And one of the documents that was stored there was this password document. Now, somebody had accidentally, when they were sharing the document, selected share this document with all users in the organization. Now, when they did that, that gave the model access to that document. So when we queried that, we got access to it. So one of the best things you can do to prevent this is ensure that no documents are allowed to be shared with all members of the organization. You want to make sure that when we're sharing documents, we're sharing them only with select people. On top of that, you want to make sure that there's controls in place through either data loss prevention or some other controls that will prevent the user from even asking the question, give me a list of passwords. We want our model to prevent it right then and there.
Great, thank you. And also, you mentioned the organizations can either adopt a strict no AI policy if their risk tolerance is low or implement a formalized AI governance framework. Do you recommend both approaches depending on the organization, or do you advocate for adoption of of a governance policy as the preferred path?
Yeah, it really depends on your organization and your risk tolerance. Now, if we do decide that we're going to go down the path of no AI is allowed, that needs to still be formalized through both policies. So we still need an AI acceptable use policy, which clearly states that AI is not acceptable to use. We need to clearly disseminate that policy to all of our employees so that they know AI is not allowed to be used. And we need to make sure that we have technical controls in place. The risk we're afraid of is our employees going behind our back and utilizing AI without our knowledge. So even if we say no, an employee might pull up ChatGPT and still ask it questions. So the best practice is to make sure that even if our policy is no AI, we have some policy and some technical controls in place to prevent that.
Okay. This one says, what if an employee is using their own subscription of AI and we record all their entries? Let's say employee enters healthcare info and a screenshot.
Yeah, so this is the bring your own AI strategy. So this is not a recommended strategy. we want to make sure that employees aren't just using their own tools. We want to make sure that we have tools that we control and manage. It's very difficult to get insight into what our employees are doing. So for example, if Judy were to just take out ChatGPT and start providing sensitive customer information, our IT department has no insight into that, which is another reason why we have technical controls to block it. So if Judy's on our network, she will not be able to access ChatGPT and won't be able to even try to break our policies.
Okay, and this one is, given the prevalence of personal AI tools, how does one enforce policies restricting use on unmanaged computers and devices?
Yes, so you can do that through the network layer. So you want to make sure on the firewall or on your DNS server, wherever employees are connecting, maybe through the VPN, you are setting restrictions so that employees literally cannot visit these sites. So again, I have a firewall rule set in our firewall that says if you go to ChatGPT, it blocks the connection. You can also use application blacklists. So if you have a anti-malware tool or an employee software tools such as like Malwarebytes or SentinelOne, you can go in there and add these tools to your blacklist so that if employees are using those, it's going to be blacklisted. And then you can put restrictions even on like your Wi-Fi network. So most Wi-Fi routers will allow you to place some kind of firewall controls. And so you can manage that through there.
How about detective controls, like novel pen testing methods to discover misuse?
Yeah, that's a good one. How do we detect? So we want to make sure that when we're implementing AI, that detection is built in. So if you're using like an enterprise large language model, for example, Microsoft Copilot has sent systems in place so that you can see what employees are doing and so that you can audit what they're doing. You also want to undergo these pen tests so that you can actually test the AI model and see, can I get around some of these detection tools? Can I trigger my detections? Just like we would do in a regular pen test, right? In a regular pen test, we've set up some preventative and detection controls. And during a regular pen test, the pen tester comes in and tries to trigger those controls. And we want to test, do we actually detect them? Are our controls enough?
Okay, and what is the best practice to safeguard when a vendor uses a third-party model to an API call? Do you use a right to audit for that party or review the vendor's SOC report to see if they controls in place or see if they're doing pen testing? I think essentially the question is, how do you monitor your third-party vendors? What are the best techniques?
Yes. The best technique is if we can audit them directly and see what they're doing. Now, that's not always feasible and possible. So again, a SOC report that includes their AI. You need to not just review their SOC report in general, but specifically anything related to AI there. You also probably want some service level agreements in your contracts that clearly define how the third party vendor can use AI, so that their contract can enforce any AI problems there. But I love the idea of reviewing the SOC reports or auditing that third party directly. And again, just like you would do for a traditional third party vendor management, when we're onboarding and we're providing our third party vendors questionnaires and requesting evidence, AI should be included in that. We should include questions about how they're utilizing AI and ensure that we're collecting evidence that supports that.
Oh, this question's a good one. No, not that they all were good, but this is somebody who says, that you stated that the AI team should be cross-function, including compliance, sales, legal, etc. Our problem is that including these has led to a great deal of people wanting multiple solutions for whatever reason, and there's too much input from teams that don't understand the security concerns with some of these tools, and that the rollout needs to be streamlined. We're having issues with managing the demands with this strategy, which I
Yeah.
could see this happening is, everybody
Yes.
wants AI to do all these things and magic tasks, and they're not attuned to the security issues.
Yeah, so this is where one, training comes into play. We want to make sure that the members of our AI team really need to understand AI, right? We certainly want all departments to give us input and feedback, but those select members from those select departments need to understand AI at a deep technical level. So we need to do specific AI risk training for AI teams. But on top of that, we need to make sure that our roadmap is clearly defined, right? So it's great to have lots of input from lots of different people, but we want to make sure that as we're developing that second step, developing our roadmap, that we are only trying to bite off what we can chew, right? Everyone's going to have their opinions, but it's up to management and the AI team to select what are our actual AI priorities and how are we going to go through that in an organized and structured manner, right? It shouldn't be chaos, right? If you do well-structured AI team meetings, you make sure everyone is aware of the risk and everyone understands the technology and bring them together at the table, you'll have productive meetings.
Yeah, I think this kind of relates back to something you said earlier about I think the board could have some involvement here. If the board understands the risks, they might be important in trying to contain. And then you also mentioned that you have to pick your goal, and you can't do all your goals at once. So that would be another way to sort of manage that situation, I think. We're out of time for questions. We do have a couple announcements if you go to the next slide. Okay. Uh, if you didn't get your question answered, or if you want to discuss your organization's AI and strategy and risk management with Colin, you could scan this QR code. He's agreed to provide anyone who attended today's webinar with a free 1 hour appointment with him, and we've synced it with his calendar. So you might want to take advantage of that. And if you go to the next slide, Colin, we want to tell you that we are going to have more webinars in this series. The next one we want to do in October will be how attackers are using AI against organizations and some countermeasures to fight back. So look for that in October. We'll also be announcing these on our LinkedIn if you want to follow that. As so with that, I just want to thank all of you for attending. We had great attendance. I want to thank ISACA again for co-sponsoring. And again, we'll be sending this webinar out this afternoon, so you can have it on demand whenever you need it. And thank you very much, Colin, for the presentation.
Thank you, Judy.